Hi, beautiful soul. If this message has found you, it might be because you feel stuck in life or a situation where you're unfulfilled, you're being taken for granted, and no matter how hard you work or how hard you try, it's leaving you burnt out and exhausted. And you keep seeing the potential in the situation, whether it's a workplace, a relationship, or friendships, but it just doesn't happen. You're feeling miserable and hoping for something to change. And I'm here to tell you, my love, that it's not going to change until you change it. So we're conditioned by our parents, by society, to reject and suppress parts of ourselves, whether it's our, inner feminine or masculine energies, which we all have inside of us, as a protection mechanism. And for me, it was both. So I worked on healing my wounded masculine because that was more prominent at the time. I thought that was my main issue. And when masculine energies in my orbit started showing up in more supportive and healthy ways, I thought that must be it. My healing's complete, but I was so wrong. There was also an issue with my wounded feminine, and that was actually keeping me stuck in a toxic workplace, in unhealthy relationship dynamics, and I was constantly just like burnt out and just felt unseen, unheard. The energies were not reciprocated. And then I had this realization that healing my wounded feminine was actually the key to releasing my potential and releasing me from these energies and karmic dynamics. And so the wounded feminine energy is something we carry from childhood, from relationships and societal conditioning that leaves us feeling unsupported, disempowered, and afraid of being heard and seen. And so many beautiful souls that I've spoken to are being impacted by this right now. We're working ourselves into the ground, we're people pleasing, we're hoping for our energy to be reciprocated, but it just isn't, it never is. We wear this mask and hide what we really think and feel. And we feel we have to please others, stay small, avoid speaking up. And when we do show our authentic selves, when we do speak up, we're met with either being ignored or dismissed at best, and at worst, actual repercussions and backlash, which is something that I experienced, particularly in the workplace. And so we tell ourselves these lies that we aren't enough and we need more qualifications or experience, we're not lovable enough, we're not pretty enough, and that we're not good enough as we are. And that just keeps us stuck, these limiting beliefs. And I told myself the same lies. I dedicated my energy for such a long time to one-sided or unbalanced relationships, to matrix jobs, like trying to climb the corporate ladder, doing a law degree, and just experienced burnout after burnout until I was in such a bad way that I just couldn't take it anymore. And I hear beautiful souls, absolutely beautiful people saying things like, if I had my time again, I would do this other thing. But it's actually never too late. We're never truly stuck. We're never completely backed into a corner that we can't get out of. It's always possible to turn things around, no matter what your age is, no matter what your situation is. And so I went down this path. It completely burnt me out. And then I had this realization, and I don't regret the path that I took. All of this led me, now that I look back on it with gratitude, to being broken, for my life being shattered in some instances. And that has allowed me to actually create a more fulfilling vision and build things on a better foundation from the ground up. And I didn't realize this at the time, and I wasn't ready to really, but now I can see the silver lining and the gifts in all of my past suffering. And if you're currently going through something really dense, my heart goes out to you. I love you, and you'll get through this. And I'm not suggesting to even look at any positives. Just support yourself through healing and do whatever you need to do. And when you're ready, you might see things from a different perspective. But being stuck in our wounded feminine keeps us stuck in fear and resistance to actually moving on, which is the thing that we need to do. It's like our inner world, the cells in our body, the core of our being are telling us we want something to be different, but our external reality just doesn't reflect our desires. And I always had this niggling feeling that it must be possible to have more fulfilling and reciprocal relationships, friendships, and otherwise, to be fulfilled work-wise. But I persisted and pushed myself to stay in relationships, friendships, well past their expiration dates, and in workplaces, working longer and harder, climbing the corporate ladder. I was whoever they needed me to be, and I knew I wasn't happy, but I was able to tolerate it, and so I did. Until I couldn't tolerate my situation anymore. And as I pushed myself to work ridiculously long hours, I just started getting more and more exhausted and anxious. I started developing issues in my body, and I was pretty much unable to take part in anything that brought me joy. So from sitting extra long hours, I developed bursitis and inflammation in my hips. My thyroid started struggling. I was constantly sick, like catching colds every month, tonsillitis, this reoccurrent tonsillitis that just happened every month. I was like completely run down. Like I just spent my time resting. I couldn't do anything. I was just like, all I could do was the basics at work, and that was it. And I became increasingly exhausted. Anxiety and mental health became a thing, and I just kept going for like 2 years of that until one day I was absolutely in dread. A whole bunch of work had been dumped on my lap, and I was already completely at capacity, and it was just enough to push me, to launch me out of that life, that reality, into a space of healing. And so I ended up feeling the dread, contacting my doctor and getting a medical certificate for like 3.5 months, which I did end up extending for longer. I extended it a few more times. But once I finally did that, it was like stepping out of a washing machine. I just felt like I just stepped out of that reality, that crappy reality that was making me so unhappy, and I gave myself the space and time to heal. And so I slept for like months, the first few months. Started to recuperate because I wasn't sleeping before. I stopped sleeping with anxiety and things like that. And as I started to recover, I was able to incorporate more healthy habits like eating healthy food. I started exercising. The inflammation started coming out of my body. I also had put on like 30 kilos. That started coming off just naturally through what I was eating and exercising more. So once I finally removed myself to have the space and time to heal, and this was literally the thing that I needed to do, nothing else had worked up until that point. I kept putting off leaving the situation out of fear. I was like worried about what would people think and how would this impact me negatively moving forward in terms of opportunities. I can't let people down, like all these toxic limiting thoughts, and fixating on external perceptions and not on myself, on what would make me happy and what would be good for me. But I finally reached my breaking point and did the thing. So I also ended up cutting out or distancing myself from toxic people. And as I did all of those things that I mentioned, slowly my confidence came back. I developed a stronger sense of self and worth. I started to believe I was worthy and could attain success, fulfilling reciprocal relationships, peace, joy, harmony, and all those good things in life. And so how did this healing happen? Well, I had to be able to acknowledge that the wounded feminine existed. Notice where I felt dismissed, unseen, rejected, unsupported, disempowered, invalidated, just like having an awareness of the historical and current situations where those things exist, noticing where imbalances of energy exist, whether workplaces or relationships. And I spent a lot of time in quiet reflection thinking about this. So my child was super chaotic, very toxic. There was wounded masculine, feminine, and lack mentality energies going on everywhere. I was also the family scapegoat. It was quite hard. And I also didn't have any strong female role models in my orbit or vicinity to be inspired by. And so acknowledging all of this was a really powerful first step. I showed myself a lot of compassion as well. So I made space to basically sit with my fears, sit with my pain, disappointments, all of that stuff. Forgave myself for mistakes I'd made, forgave those people that hurt me, and just provided myself with the validation that I rarely, if ever, received. And just let go of self-judgment. And slowly I started to feel worthy of love and support. And that included inner child work. So I really sat with that, younger version of myself. I sat with her and I held her and I just let her know. I visualized this younger version of myself and sat with her and let her know that she may not have felt supported in the past, but she would be supported moving forward, and she would be seen and heard, and her feelings were valid, and I would be there to support her moving forward. Really, yeah, reparenting in a way. And through this process, every time I had a negative thought or felt fear, shame, or judgment of myself, I would pause and just reframe it to be more compassionate, I did the best I knew at the time, and I'm worthy of love, success, and happiness. Other practical things I did, which I found really helpful, was meditation, was journaling, just journaling and piecing the story of my life together from this perspective now, this higher perspective of, my family dynamics. And this is where, they were coming from, but it still hurt me. And so having that understanding of how it all fit together and how I got to this point was really helpful. Meditating as well, just leaving a lot of space and time to check in with my intuition and go back as deep as I could, as far back as I could, to try and have that deeper understanding of how I got here. And then I also put calendar reminders in my phone 3 times a day just to check in with myself and ask myself, what do I need? Whether it was mind, body, or something else. Because another part of my wounded feminine was not prioritizing my own needs and disconnecting from myself to basically survive. So disconnecting from emotional needs, physical needs, and prioritizing whatever was the critical priority at that time above myself. So checking in with myself and having that calendar reminder actually started getting me in the habit of having that connection, connecting back into myself. So another thing that I've learned to do and that comes up when our wounded feminine, needs some work and healing is boundaries. And I know a lot of people who basically self-abandon. They have really kind of wishy-washy boundaries, really flimsy boundaries. And so being able to say no and setting boundaries to protect our energy is really important, and it's a big sign of self-love and respect. So I really struggled to say no to work, to family, to friends. I grew up where it was pretty much culturally unacceptable to, have boundaries. Like, it was seen as selfish to not self-abandon. So there was this expectation that other people's needs in the family or whatever were more important than your own. Like, it was really unacceptable to say no. But I just did. I started saying no. I started small, saying no to little things at first, and then ended up completely reinforcing really strong boundaries between myself and people, that workplace, just not feeling guilty about it, knowing that it's fine, it's safe, like I can do this, it's good for me, and just doing that. So it takes practice, I think, as well. I can now, my experiences are more positive in general. It's rare that I even have to enforce a boundary. Like, I've done so much work in terms of establishing boundaries that, it's rare that things come up. But if they do, and occasionally they do, of course, I can identify pretty quickly, what that energy is, if it's taking me for granted or whatever, and can remove myself from that dynamic pretty much immediately without hesitation. And that's just about confidently but politely saying no. So when we start working on our wounded feminine, we move from a place of scarcity and fear to abundance and flow. And as we do this super important work, we begin to heal our wounded inner feminine energy and start to believe in ourselves. We start to feel worthy of a better, more fulfilling life. And we have the courage to find ways out of situations we feel stuck in. And by acknowledging this energy, practicing self-compassion, reconnecting with our inner power, setting healthy boundaries, noticing where we're wearing a mask and hiding our authenticity to fit in without judgment. And eventually we'll see the steps we need to take to align with our more authentic self. That's all I wanted to share. I love you. Take care of yourself.